Hi, everybody. My name is Buddy Gott. Welcome to the Buddies Book Buddies podcast. Today, I have a guest with me who is an author of multiple books, including a brand new one called Gemma that I'm actually very excited to read. And the name of my guest is Lauren A. Forry. Welcome to the show, Lauren.
Hi, buddy. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure to have you here. We talked a little bit before the show, and I was mentioning how not only am I excited about your new book, but also your older ones too. You have, I believe, four novels total. Is that correct?
Yes, and one that's been only published in the Czech Republic. So
Oh, really? Oh, that's
yeah, we
pretty
never found an
fascinating.
English publisher for it, but for some reason the Czech Republic liked it. But yeah, I consider it just four though.
Okay, I gotcha. Still, that's pretty fascinating there. Well, why don't we, since you have a new one out, let's talk about that one first. And if I'm correct, that just came out in August last month, right?
August 6th, I got the copy here. Came on by. So Gemma, so this is my
Oh, that's
fourth
a
one
beautiful
here.
cover.
It's very nice, very shiny. So yeah, I got to participate in the cover design, which I'm terrible at. But it was nice being asked for my input, even though I have no clue what I'm doing.
Well, judging from that one, I wouldn't say you're terrible at it at all. That looks
It was,
fantastic.
I sent some general ideas, and then their cover designer came up with about like three or four different mock options. And so we went with the one we all liked best, and then kind of tweaked it from there.
Oh, well, that's great. That's great. Can you tell my audience what Gemma is about? I read the synopsis, and to me, it sounds great.
Yeah, so Gemma, loosely, the simple version is that Gemma is about an unnamed narrator who goes to the police station in Reading, Pennsylvania, where she lives, to report her pregnant sister missing. But it turns out it's a lot more complicated than it seems on the surface, and it all seems to tie back to this Gemma who was their roommate about and went missing about 6 months prior. So the sister has just gone missing. It's that same night. But Gemma went missing 6 months ago and they've never found her. And so it's all kind of tied together with what happened to Gemma, how is it connected? And it's unique for me because it's told completely in the first person. And I usually don't like the first person, not reading it or writing it. So it was very odd for me, but it just kind of came out. And I kind of based it also on this idea really, I saw in a true crime documentary on Investigation Discovery, not the plot itself, but the police were interviewing a convicted killer who was already in jail because they knew he had killed this other person many decades before. And they were
Oh,
trying to get a confession, find the body to help give the family closure. So they would, over the course of several months, they kept going back and interviewing this guy. And I don't even remember what exactly the case was about. But what interested in me was that each time they interviewed him, he gave a little bit more information. You know, his story just changed a little bit as they were able to tease it out of him. So, like the first interview, he was like, "Oh yeah, I was at that mall, but I didn't even see that girl. I don't know what you're talking about." And then the next interview, he opened up a little bit more. I mean, he was already in jail, so
right.
like they could take their time. And he was like, "Oh yeah, I did see her, and but I just gave her a ride down the block." And then
Okay.
it was, well, I did know her from before. She was friends with my cousin. And then I took
The
her,
story just
actually, I
kept
didn't go take her
changing
for a
there,
ride
huh?
down the block. We actually went over here. And it just, each layer kind of peeled back more and more with also trying to limit his own involvement. So I
Right.
thought that was a really cool, I mean, he wasn't trying, he was telling a story, but not for, fictional purposes, not
Right.
for writing purposes. But I thought it was a really cool idea to have a narrator who is going through that kind of interview process and seems like a witness at first, but each time she tells a version of the story, you get a little bit more out of her. So the book is positioned as if you, the reader, are the detective and she's talking to you.
Oh, I
And
love
you
that.
don't hear any other voice but hers. So she might be responding to questions, but you don't see or hear the detectives asking her questions.
Oh, that's fantastic.
They try, yeah. So it goes about all these different versions of she's revealing what happened at the river last night. And it kind of changes over the course of the novel. But within that, she digresses and she talks about what happened 6 months ago with Gemma and what happened right after Gemma went missing. So it's a very non-linear timeline in a way that hopefully makes sense. But eventually it does. I do answer questions. So it kind of wraps up at the end.
Oh, well, that sounds wonderful. And I love that you were inspired by that interview that you saw. Isn't it great how sometimes things from real life can spark ideas that we're not going to take and use 100%, but they kind of spark something and get you thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I only like first person, and this is just personal preference. I know this is not how first person has to be written, but I prefer first person novels when there's a reason they're telling it in the first person. Like it's
Mhm.
a expository novel, so it's journal entries, or they reveals at the end what they've been doing, like they've been writing a confessional or something like that. I like a
Mhm.
reason to be talking in the first person.
Right,
For
right.
me, I was like, I want to take that and also play kind of with the narrative structure too and see how much I can get away with because it's a very, very limited perspective. And does she know when she's lying? Do I know when she's lying? When is she telling the truth? How is it coming across?
Wow, that just sounds really great, and I like that. I am a fan of first person, but I can totally see what you're saying. I remember reading. It's an older author. I don't know if you'd be familiar with him, named Ed McBain, who wrote a long series of mostly detective novels called The 57th Precinct. But he was not a fan at all of first person, and I remember reading an interview with him where he was very adamant that writers should have a reason for doing that, just as you just said. There should be a reason that is the only way that story could be told, and every story is different, certainly, but it sounds like it suits your story perfectly. That whole
This
situation.
Yeah, this particular one, yeah, it did. It actually started as a writing exercise. I was editing another book and just hadn't written anything fresh in a while. So it's like, oh, I'll just set a timer, write randomly for 15 minutes, and I wasn't trying to turn it into anything. And this one line popped into my head. That's not even in the book anymore. I cut it later, edit, but that's not how it happened at all. And so it kind of started there, and I just let the character kind of talk through me, and then I'd stop the timer after 15 minutes. And God, I don't even know how many thousands words because I didn't care because it was just kind of for my
Right.
own purposes. And then after I was finishing another book, I was like, oh, there's
Oh,
is an idea
great.
here. There is kind of a story here
Oh,
that I could
that's excellent.
unravel.
Excellent. And I know that every writer I talk to tells me that their writing process can vary from book to book. And I was just wondering, if that's the case for you. Like, if, say, in some instances you are more, as they say, writing by the seat of your pants, just kind of winging it, or if I know, especially with you having written mysteries and thrillers, that a lot of them have to be intricately plotted. Does it
Mhm.
sort of vary for you depending on?
Oh, a ton. And I don't know if I'll ever write a book the way I wrote Gemma again because it was terrible. I'm usually a very linear writer. I like to write the story from beginning to end in the way it's going to appear in the novel because it helps me. I'll know key plot points in advance, and it helps me to be able to see that plot point ahead and write to it. But for Gemma, because it kind of started at this little writing exercise that I basically had all these different snippets and I didn't know what to do with. So I just kind of started writing various scenes that I
Hmm.
thought that it felt like the character wanted to tell me about. Sometimes it was like backstory of her life. Sometimes it was something with Gemma. Sometimes it was how her sister went missing. And then I just pieced it all together with a lot of post-it notes and color coding. But it was like, I don't know why I did this to myself. It was probably the hardest way I've ever written a novel. And it took a lot of fine tuning and kind of then reading through each basically individual plot line of what happened last night, what happened 6 months ago, what happened immediately after Gemma went missing. And then sometimes its pacing was too slow, so I had to cut some scenes out that I didn't really need, or I had to move stuff around because it wasn't working in the narrative arc. But yeah, I don't ever want to write a book like that. And the launch
I can
party,
understand that.
yeah.
I'm a writer too. I'm actually writing my first novel right now, and I've tried others in the past, and I've done versions of what you just said, where I would have post-it notes, or maybe 5 or 6 notebooks laying around, with all different kinds of ideas and plot points, and yeah, sometimes it can be chaotic. I hear that from
I
a
mean,
lot
I'm
of
I'm a
writers.
bit of a pantser too. I don't like to do a super detailed outline
Hmm.
line in advance. I generally like to know how it opens, a few key plot points, how it's generally going to wrap up, and then I let the story tell it to me as I'm writing, and then go back and revise it. And that's what I've done with most of my books to some extent or another, except for Gemma. Lots of spreadsheets were involved.
And I think that I'm pretty new on my journey with writing. I've written on and off throughout my life, but now I'm really into it in a way that I never have been before. But I think I am more along the lines of what you just described. I kind of like to wing it to a large degree. I'm like for this book that I'm writing, I know it's a murder mystery. I know who the killer is.
Mhm.
I know a couple of aspects of the story, some of the twists that are going to be in there, but that's about it. But I'm okay with that. I know what I'm writing towards, and I think it'll be part of the fun and probably the frustration at times to, discover those things as I go. It's a I don't know. Writing is a blast. It could be nerve wracking, but it's a blast.
Somebody asked me that question. I did an event at Doylestown Bookshop the other Saturday, and that somebody asked that question. They were also working on a mystery and wanted to know how much I had planned out in advance. And I told him it was like, for me, I think it's important to know, first of all, just do the Agatha Christie thing, start at the end and
Yeah.
work backwards because it
Yes.
really does work. And she knew what she was talking about.
Yeah.
But I feel
Sure
like it's
did.
important when it's if you're going straight for murder mystery or thriller, you have to know who did it and why.
Mm-hmm.
How I feel like I can figure out the how it all unfolded as the novel goes, but I need to know who was responsible for it and what their motivation was, because otherwise there wouldn't be a book. Because if they didn't commit this crime, no book. But the actual details of how that's going to unfold, I kind of figure out as I go along. I will literally write notes like they find evidence here, and I don't know what it's going to be, but I
Right.
know
Oh
they need
no,
to
I
find
love that.
something, and then I'll come back and I'll put something in that once I get to the end, I'm like, okay, it makes sense. This can be the clue.
Right.
But
And
it's
for me, I love keeping it a little looser like that. I have tried the other way where I have had, pretty detailed outlines for every chapter that was going to be in a book. And as I was writing it, I would find myself straying from it because, as you're writing, things come to you that you get excited about. And maybe the way you want to take the story isn't how you originally envisioned it when you were doing that outline. I think that's the thing. I think with whether it's writing or any other thing in the arts, you kind of have to let yourself, do what you're feeling at the time and, work towards that goal.
yeah, and the characters will change too. Like I do
Mhm.
character sketches and I plan things out for the characters, but sometimes as I get to know them, it's like, well, they're not going to do that thing.
Right.
I thought they were going to do this thing, and that's my initial plan. But now that I know them really well, I'm like, they're not going to do it. It would be out of character for them. So now I have to change. Might have to let a younger dog in this room who is very upset
Oh, okay. Well,
that
yeah, please do what you
that
need to
he's
do there.
not allowed in. Come here, young sir. All right.
We are hopefully going to meet a
Now you
dog
will be.
here, ladies and gentlemen.
Now we'll be happy. Milton is here.
Oh, hello, Milton.
Milton is the baby. Milton is a year
Welcome
and
to the
a half.
Buddies Book Buddies podcast. I have to say, you are the first dog that's been on the show, so welcome.
He's very, very literary, even though his name's for Milton Hershey, not for a literary character. But
Yeah, yeah,
Christmas Eve
before
puppy.
now, before we get back to your books, I wanted to ask you about some of the wonderful things I'm seeing behind you there on your wall. You have a
Oh,
movie poster of The Invisible Man Returns. That's
that
fantastic.
was a high school graduation gift from a friend who was a coworker at this deli I used to work at in high school.
Oh, wow.
I loved at the time one of my favorite TV show was the Sci-Fi Channel's The Invisible Man that only ran for 2 seasons.
I remember
And
that.
I loved that show so much. And so she got me that. It's metal. This is a tin one too. Oh,
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 fantastic. I love
sorry,
that. Yeah, I love that. And am I seeing some photos from movies as well there, like movie scenes?
yeah, I've got this is from Doctor Who. What's in
Oh, nice. Okay.
that was the Radio Times special print. I lived in London at the time.
Oh, wow.
They offered when John Sim first appeared as the Master.
Oh,
I've
nice.
got a cardboard cutout of John Sim as the Master in the corner of my office. Over, you can't see, it's over here. That was my best friend's. That when she moved back to Norway from London, I she gave it to me, and I smuggled him home in my luggage.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's a perfect
Um,
thing to smuggle.
yeah, and that's also John Sim. That's from Life on Mars.
Oh,
Uh,
I've never seen Life on
oh my,
Mars. I've
that's how my
always
best
heard
friend and
great
I
things about
met.
it.
Love that show so much. Again, only 2 seasons, but it was only supposed to be. But
I,
my best friend got me that one autographed to me. She waited outside the stage door for him
oh, wow.
after a show, and she got him to sign it.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. I remember watching the first couple episodes of the American version of
Oh,
Life on Mars, and that's I had never seen the original. Oh, yeah.
yeah.
For the audio only listeners, Lauren doesn't seem to be a big fan
But
of the
no, I
original.
mean, I actually own it on DVD because, just to have a record of it. And
Right.
if you look at it in context of what it was, like what they were trying to do, the Americanized version, like fine, kind of like the US Office became its own thing.
Hmm.
It
Right.
didn't get enough time to do that. And I just love the British version so much that everything
Uh,
that they tried to do is just very cringy. It really didn't have time to grow.
yeah, and that's unfortunately a problem you see a lot with TV series, especially when they get canceled really quickly. There's so many that have such potential, but they
Yeah,
just
and
have
that
to
was
have
a
that.
pretty high cost too, because it was period, so it was set in the 70s, so that cost more money
Oh
than
yeah, yeah,
contemporary, so
definitely.
they didn't really have a chance to. But anyway, the UK version, people should definitely watch. And
Yeah,
Ashes to Ashes that followed is pretty good, but go with
I
the
will,
original.
I will check
Now
it
I
out.
have dogs wrestling.
And one last thing about that actor, John, is it Sim or Sims? Plural.
Sim with the
Okay.
SIMM.
He was fantastic as the Master. Absolutely
Oh, I know.
loved him as the Master. I've been into Doctor Who for I guess about 10 years. So, and then I kind of binge watched all of the excuse me, all of the series that they've done since it came back in 2005, I believe. And he was just wonderful. Just
Yeah, I mean, I knew John Sim because of Life on Mars before that. When I heard he was cast in it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be amazing. And he was. And I've
wonderful.
seen him twice on stage, and
Oh, really?
he is, yeah, just as dynamic on stage as he is on film, TV. And it's a shame he kind of never really took hold in the US because he's
Yeah. I know
past.
he's in a newer series that I think is on something I have, either Acorn or one of
Yeah,
those.
it's on one of those. He's been doing some cop shows and still working over there.
Yeah. He's
But
so very talented.
yeah.
So very talented. And, speaking of, well, I don't know what kind of transition I'm trying to make here, but anyway, Gemma sounds fantastic. But I want to talk about the book that you put out last year as well, and your other ones. The one last year, it sounds so very unique. It's called The Launch Party. Can you tell my audience about, oh, there's the launch
Yeah,
party right there. Oh, that's another wonderful cover. I love that.
so that was cool too. Yeah, it was gonna be red, and then last minute they kind of changed it to black.
Okay,
So
well,
the
that's
door knocker.
beautiful.
So this was it came out in the UK last summer, and it is available in the Audible and Kindle in the US now. And the paperback it will be available in October in the
Oh,
US
great.
for paperback copies. But yeah, that's a much more standard murder mystery, except the setting. It's set on the first commercial hotel on the moon, but
I love that.
it's not a sci-fi novel. It's not like Aliens.
Hmm.
It's not in space and it's not supposed to be terrifying. But set kind of just a few years down in the future, imagining that they were able, some corporation was able to build a commercial hotel on the moon, luxury hotel obviously, so kind of like SpaceX on steroids. And then the first 10 guests are actually picked in a contest, so it's like anybody could enter. So the first pages of the book are actually the contest form, so anybody could enter, and then these
Oh,
10 people
wow.
were randomly picked and they get sent there. And then when they get to the hotel, there's actually nobody else there.
Oh.
There's no, it seems empty. There is no staff. Hi, Watson. It's not the time to play, guys. Um, there is no staff there. There's nobody else but the 10 of them. And then that same night, one of the guests gets murdered. So obviously,
Wow.
limited pool of suspects. But to me, it functions more as like a Murder on the Orient Express, but
Hmm.
in space.
Yeah, I
And this
love
one is
that.
much more straightforward POV, limited third person of the various guests there. And there was a detective because she was one of the people that was randomly chosen, as it happens. But what was nice about that was because I write in the limited third person POV and none of these people are physicists, I didn't have to explain how the hotel works because
Oh,
none of them
see, that's
know.
great.
So I had loose research in there, like like
That
some
was
of like the
brilliant.
basics. But how it actually operates on a day-to-day basis, I did not have to worry about because none of them are going to know.
Well, that's great. That's great. When I was reading the description of it, it was really stood out to me because I liked those locked room mysteries. And, my goodness, if you're on the moon, you're pretty far off from everything. Well, you were talking about Agatha Christie earlier too. And, well, Murder on the Orient Express. And she was like just the ultimate master of those kinds of stories. And, yeah, I mean that sounds really really good. I love that they're on the moon. Is being at the first hotel on the moon, and I think I read that was. Did you have some inspiration from that too, by someone in real life who wanted to do something moon related, or am
It
I?
was from the publisher. Is that there's a Japanese billionaire or something that was kind of
Oh, okay.
interested in doing something like this. But that's again kind of like the in true crime documentary thing. It's just kind of like a little bit of a spark of inspiration, but not
Right.
and based off of anything. Although the spaceport, they leave from Cornwall Spaceport, and the UK is working on building a spaceport there.
Oh, that's
It would
fascinating.
not be for at this time. It would not be for commercial use. It would be more for business or whatever
Right.
else they want to try.
Well, the launch party sounds great too. I mean, so does Gemma, and then the previous one. I love the title of you have great titles for your books. It was They Did Bad Things.
That's one of my favorites. I
Yeah,
wrote
that's a psychological thriller. Is that right?
psychological thriller. I wrote that book because of how much I hate house parties. Um, it
Okay, then
really,
that sounds like something I might enjoy reading
yeah,
because
it's
I
like
hate
I am
those
not
kinds
a
of parties
fan
too.
of, I'm an introvert. I'm not a fan of parties. I don't do parties except for like family Christmas parties or Thanksgiving parties. And my best friend, she had made me go with her to when she was doing her undergrad while I was doing my master's in London. And so she made me go to this film like party with her film school friends, and I went to NYU. Like I've been through like the undergrad film student thing. Like
Right.
they even brought out a ukulele at this party. I'm like, I don't need to live through this again. It was just, I mean, nothing awful happened, but it was just not a, it was just a miserable experience. And I got this horrible cold after it too that
Oh
lasted
no.
for like 2 weeks. And this was decade before COVID. So it wasn't that,
Wow.
but gave me this lingering cough for like a month.
Wow.
And I was like, I hated this. I hated you made me do this. I want to kill everybody that goes to parties like this. And so that's kind of how the idea was born. But basically this group of 40 somethings are lured or to this being basically a fancy Airbnb type resort in an isolated part of Scotland and on the Isle of near
Oh.
it's a made up island, but it's supposed to be like right off of the Isle of Skye. So again, very isolated location.
Oh, wonderful.
They get there and they immediately realize that they were tricked into being there because they all recognize each other. And it
Oh.
turns out they were all roommates their first year of university in the UK. And something happened when they lived together that first year that they covered up. And so it has to do with some sort of revenge on what they didn't happen to them in college. Because
Oh,
yeah,
wonderful.
one thing I did my master's in the UK, like I mentioned, and one thing that interested me about just how their university system works is with the housing. Now
Hmm.
nowadays it's much more common to have US dorm style housing, but especially in the 90s when that part of Bad Things is set, they didn't. Pretty much you just had to find your own housing. Like unless you were going
Oh,
to like a
okay.
really fancy Cambridge or something like that where they have those halls. If you went to like a second rate university like my characters do, you're on your own. You had to find your own housing. And so a lot of times you got all these first year students moving to this area, randomly finding people to live with that they don't even know. So I like
Wow.
taking that idea of a group of very young strangers who individually they're perfectly fine people, but there's something with the chemistry of them that when you put them together, it's just turns into poison. It
Wow.
really should not have been together. They play off all their worst traits instead of bringing out the best in each other. They bring out the absolute worst, and it has
Well,
ramifications.
well, that sounds fantastic too. I mean, you've got some great plots and for your novels. Seriously, those sound fantastic. And then I wanted to cover too. Your first, I guess it was your first novel, Abigail Hall. Is that right?
Yeah, Abigail Hall. So that was my MFA thesis project.
Oh,
And that's
really?
what I always like to tell my MFA students, like pick a new project, pick something that your head isn't in the weeds about, because in my experience, both as a student and seeing my fellow students and as an instructor, students who come in with a fresh idea for their project into their MFA tend to do better than those that are trying to tinker with whatever they've been working on for 5, 10, 15 years. Because it allows you to, I think, learn better because you're not so set in what you think this book should
Hmm.
be, and learn more about what the MFA or the program's trying to teach you about writing, and then you can take that and apply it to your old books. But so Abigail Hall was my MFA thesis. I wrote about 2/3 of it for my program, and then I finished it right after. But that's a Gothic horror set in post-war Britain, so 1947. Another thing where I was really interested in the differences between the US and the UK, because for us in the US, obviously, immediate post war, baby boom, out of the Great
Hmm.
Depression, everything was great,
Right.
quotation marks. But we weren't rationing it or anything like that anymore. There was all this, economic prosperity. And the UK, it was the opposite. They had rationing up until the 50s. They were in a severe
Right.
depression. They spent all their money defending themselves in the war. That they had nothing left, and it was still very difficult to get items. It was a very depressed period. So I thought it would be fun to write, set something dark during that time. So it's about two sisters who are orphaned living with their aunt who doesn't really care about them. Typical Gothic horror fashion, they get sent out for reasons to a mysterious house in Wales, where there's nothing else but a creepy old man and his creepy old housekeeper,
Oh, wow.
and stuff happens.
Yeah, I read the blurb for that too, and that sounds really good too. All of them, there's like, just this thrilling stuff and some potentially really creepy stuff going on too. So that I love those sorts of things. And that leads me to a question too. I wanted to ask you now, since I follow you now on Instagram and on your author Facebook page, and I love on Instagram where it says you're a writer of murders and other things. So you just love those kinds of intriguing, twisty things. When you first started writing, well, let me go back even further than that. What were some of the first books that I don't know made you a lover of fiction when you were a
Easy
kid?
goosebumps.
Was that
All the
Goosebumps?
goosebumps. Goosebumps. All the goosebumps. I read all of those. Bunnicula. I think the Bunnicula books, the whole Bunnicula series.
Oh, okay,
I
wonderful.
had a bunny that kind of looked like Bunnicula, so that was a black and
Now
white.
I'm saying oh wonderful, but I don't know who or what Bunnicula is. That's
Oh,
the first time
Bunnicula.
I've
Oh,
ever
it's
heard
great. So
Bunnicula.
it came out in the night. It came out first when I was a kid, or maybe it's even older than that. But it's a young age. It's a kid's book. It's
Okay.
below, it's considered middle grade now, though they don't think they really had those publishing terms then. But
Right.
it's a chapter book, and it's about a bunny who sucks the life out of vegetables.
Oh,
So in
wow.
the first book, when they bring him home, it's the cat that's like the narrator, the cat that lives in the house, and he has a dog best friend, and it's like, oh, the family's brought in this bunny, and then all the vegetables start getting, drained of their life, and then
Oh,
they
wow. That's
learn it's Bunnicula,
fantastic.
and he's not evil, bunny. But then there's a whole series of like the books of the animals going on
Oh,
adventure.
those sound great. Now, when
And
you were falling in love with those books, is that when you maybe first tried your hand at writing stories too? Did you attempt that
oh
when you were
yeah,
really young?
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I didn't realize I wanted to write professionally until like my first semester of college, and my
Oh,
parents were
okay.
like, "We were waiting for you to figure that out because we knew." But yeah, my mom
Uh,
has the early stories. I don't know if there's the Dogzilla books, which were the guy took the picture of his dog, his corgi, and mice, and like use that as illustrations.
oh, okay. I've heard of them, but I
Yeah, so
never
I
read them
tried to like
myself.
remake my own version. I took like with an old camera, like disposable camera, pictures of my pets then that my parents developed, and I cut them out, and
Oh, wow.
in the book I have a, especially I have like really short horror stories about like goo eating students on their sixth grade class trip.
Oh, that's
But
fantastic. I love that.
yeah, I mean, it wasn't just books, it was because of the X-Files too. Um,
Oh, okay.
because my dad was an FBI agent, special agent, and when I was 8 years old is when the X-Files premiered, and he
Oh,
was like,
okay.
"Oh, Lauren, there's this new show on. It's about FBI agents, and we need to watch it." And he also loved sci-fi and murder mysteries too. And back in the early 90s, there weren't all these police procedurals and stuff like that. Like there's literally a show called FBI now.
Yeah.
And there wasn't back then. So it was very exciting to have a TV show about FBI agents.
Yeah, yeah.
And from 8 years old, I watched every single episode with him.
Oh, that's
And
wonderful.
we
What a
laughed at
great thing to have in common and share.
yeah, I mean, like I said, we laughed at the parental discretion warnings. I mean, I'm the youngest of three, so they didn't really care. But by the time I came around, they're like, "You're fine. You know the difference between reality and fiction. We can watch it." But so it was a couple. That's it coupled that with like the Goosebumps and the Bunnicula and scary stories for kids. And I never really got scared of stuff like that. I just liked it.
Well, that's wonderful, wonderful. And one of the things that I enjoy seeing from authors when I follow them on social media is when they share the different kinds of things that they've been reading. And it seems like you are still a very avid reader. One thing that always surprises me when I talk to different writers, whether they're my friends or just someone that I've met through doing the show and other things, is when they say, "Oh, I never have time to read. I write, I write, but I never have time to read." And personally, I think it's important to keep reading and to keep being inspired. And it sounds like you read a lot.
Yeah, and part of it's for the writing and part of it's for the teaching.
Yeah.
Because I teach with SNHU, it's genre friendly. So I could be in the same class having a student that's writing romance versus one that's writing a murder mystery,
Hmm.
somebody writing literary fiction, somebody that wants to do a thriller, somebody doing sci-fi. So I think it's helpful for me as the instructor to be familiar with all those genres. And so is read as widely as possible, even if it's something I normally wouldn't choose on my own. Although my preference does lead more towards thrillers, mysteries, horrors. That's what I read the most of, but I try to mix it up with some others. So that way, when students do ask me for advice, or want a reading recommendation, I can actually know some personally and not just have to Google and see what sounds good. But yeah, I know I've talked to writers in like two camps, one that love to read while they're writing, and others that prefer when they're like working on a draft to not read so that it doesn't influence their style in a
Hmm.
negative way. But they'll read outside of that, once they're not working on
Right.
the draft.
Yeah, I
But the
can
key
see.
part is that
I have that sort of the same thinking too. Like I'm avoiding like any stories that are much like the one that I'm writing right now, and reading other things.
but I think in general, you have to read at some point, whether you choose to read while you're writing a draft or not. I don't have a problem doing that, but you have to read at some point because that's how you can learn what you're doing or what's expected, particularly with genre. Like, how do you know the constraints of that genre and what's expected of that genre if you're not
Right.
reading? Not that you can't break them or change them, but you can't do that without knowing the rules first.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a huge baseball fan, so I always put it in like, why would somebody say that they want to play baseball when they've never seen a game?
Yes. Yes.
Or they've watched a couple innings and they're like, okay, I think I want to be a major league pitcher, but then they don't watch any baseball. Because if you like Bryce Harper, especially, like, dude knows he's a baseball historian. He's got all these facts. He loves
Right.
that game. He obsesses about it. But that's part of him what makes him so good because he studies the game. Or baking. I think people that are like, well, I don't like sports. I'm like, well, think of it as baking.
Hmm.
Maybe you want to make the most delicious shoe fly pie if you're Pennsylvania Dutch like me. But if you've never had a shoe fly pie, how do you even know how to make it or what it's supposed to look like by the time
I don't
it comes
think
out?
I've ever had a shoe fly
It's
pie. I
all
think.
about the molasses. I don't really cook or bake at all. I can't get me in the kitchen, but I can make a shoe fly pie. And it's
Oh,
all about the
fantastic.
molasses. But I think of it that way with the reading and writing. Like it's to me, it seems odd not to do it. If you want to be a writer and you want people to read your stuff, why aren't you reading what's out there to
Yeah.
be familiar with your field? So yeah, I mean I before my MFA, I really got out of the habit of reading anyway, because I know college kind of kills it a lot because you have so much required reading you
Yeah.
have to do. But when I started my MFA, I just started with the directions from my or guidance from my instructor at the time, some recommendations, and then just started to branch out from there and learned authors I liked, authors I didn't like, genres I preferred, and it really helped me.
Oh, I bet it did. And I think that's wonderful too, that in addition to, reading for your own pleasure, with you being an instructor, I wanted to ask you about that. Have you been teaching for a while now?
Yeah, so at SNHU, I've been with 8 years now
Oh,
before their
wonderful.
MFA program. I started as an instructor in their MA creative writing program, and then when they started the MFA, I started pretty much teaching for the MFA right away. And then I'm an English professor outside of that for about 10 years now,
Oh,
full time,
wonderful.
10 years now.
That's great. So, I mean, writing and reading is just in so many aspects of your life. I mean, that's just fantastic.
Yeah, that and when I graduated NYU, they didn't give me any guidance, and I actually graduated with film studies and screenwriting, and worked freelance film production for a few years, and I
Oh,
realized I
okay.
hated freelance. It's just so unstable, and some people can handle that. I was like, I like a stable income, knowing, having some flexibility in my job, but knowing that I have a job regularly. So when I went back for my MFA, I was like, I like being a student. I like teaching. I like college. I'll try to teach college, which was one of the other reasons for going for my MFA, so that I was qualified to teach
Oh,
college.
that's wonderful. That's
But
wonderful. And I think it's great too that, well, you had mentioned, that you had studied screenwriting, and of course that's a different way of telling stories. And but I know sometimes actually when I have written stories, I've written them out in a screenplay form first because I don't know, I think I tend to do a little bit better sometimes with dialogue, and since that's such a big part of it, well, it's just a different way of writing, but I think it's beneficial maybe sometimes to try these different things and kind of merge them together into what works for you.
yeah, I recommend to students to read scripts. When we get like talk about a unit on dialogue, I'll be like, read a screenplay, because it really is dialogue based. So I always enjoyed writing the dialogue. I find that one of the easiest things to do,
Hmm.
and to just a general plot, I can do that. But I went to my MFA because I was like, I don't know how to do anything else.
Right.
You have to make the setting description sound nice. You have to play with point of view. You have to do all this other stuff. It's not like you're writing a script that you're going to hand off and then you have literally a whole film crew that's going to make it come to life.
Right.
You have to do all of that alone. And I didn't know how. So I still use what I learned from my screenwriting. But now I know actually how to make it non screenplay format and actually engaging in the other aspects of writing.
That's fantastic. And I love too that you still will explore the different things, like you said, with your newest book being in first person, as opposed to some of your earlier works. And that's great. That's got to, keep you passionate about it because because it's all fresh and new.
Yeah, I mean, people ask me like, "Oh, are you writing a series?" I'm like, "No, I can't see myself sticking with the same characters, writing the same." Even though I like to read something like that,
Hmm.
I will pick up a book like a new Paul Tremblay book, and I'm like, "Oh, yes, it's going to be this ambiguous horror. I'm going to have to figure out. I'm going to love it." And I want similar stuff, but then when it comes to writing, I'm like, "But I get bored writing the same thing over."
Yeah.
I try to find something different or unique about it for me that I haven't done before to try to incorporate. So that's why it's kind of they're all slightly different genres, with slightly different uses of point of view, just to keep it interesting for me.
Well, that's fantastic. And then I think that'll keep it interesting for your readers too.
I hope so.
Yeah. Well,
That's
I'm
gonna be
interested in reading your books. I got to tell you that. I mean, they all sound great. And Gemma, I'm excited to read that very, very soon. And same with the launch party. And well, I'm not going to leave any out here. I want to read They Did Bad Things in Abigail Hall as well. And I think you readers out there who are listening to the show, you should check them out too. And I'd be surprised if you're, listening to the show and you're not a reader because it's Buddies Book Buddies. And I did want to mention one other thing book related. You've got something coming up. You're going to be making an appearance in October at well, in a place that I used to go to a lot when I was a kid, and that's at Hershey, Pennsylvania. This is at the what's it called? The Chocolate Town Book Fest, correct?
Yeah, Chocolate Fountain Book Test. It's free event. It's at the Hershey Public Library. There's going to be a ton of authors there. So they had 70 or some authors
Oh
last year. So
wow,
it's a
wow,
big
that's
event,
great.
all genres too. So not just like mystery or thriller or horror, but like every type of genre.
I bet that'll be
From
fun.
Yeah, so it's set up in the library from 11 to 3 on Saturday, October 5th. So we'll all have books for sale and talk to people about books and
Uh,
probably buy too many books myself. For everyone I sell, I'm probably going to end up buying another one because that's generally how it happens.
Well, it sounds like a wonderful time for for the writers who will be there, but for any readers who attend. And yeah, that's the kind of thing too. You can get yourself in trouble with making a lot of purchases. Huh?
Yeah. And then if you're a Hershey fan, Hershey's Dark Nights is going to be going on at the same time at the park. So you can come and get some books and get some scary books, and then go to Hershey Park and go through the haunted houses and the scare zones.
Now, I haven't been to Hershey Park since sometime in the 80s. I went
Oh,
there a
it's changed
lot.
a lot.
I'm sure it has. I think I used to go there I live in northern Delaware, and we used to go there on class trips every year.
Mhm.
So we would go to the park, and I remember it just being a blast. I still have fond memories of that, decades later. And my wife Lisa and I actually were looking into going there around the Halloween season. It just seems like, is it called Hershey Nights
It's called
or
Hershey Dark Nights.
oh, Hershey Dark Nights? Okay,
Right.
great.
So that's during on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday, they open the regular park at around noon, and you can do all the regular rides and stuff like that. And then at 6 o'clock, they start up the scare zones and the haunted
Oh,
houses.
wow, that
And
sounds
they
like
have
a lot of fun.
non-scary areas too for kids. Only kids get the free candy, which is
That's
still
not
insane. I
fair.
know. But then they have like a rooftop cocktail bar with special themed drinks and Halloween themed snacks and everything. But
Oh, that
most
sounds
of
like
the
a
rides
good.
are open as long as the weather's good. It's almost like summer operating season with how many
Oh,
rides they have open.
oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
A nice place
Well,
to spend the night.
I have a feeling you'll be going to that, and also I hope you have a wonderful time at the Chocolate Town Book Fest. And I wish you all the best with your newest book, Gemma. And folks, take a look for that, and take a look for Lauren's other books. I mentioned Instagram and Facebook earlier. Where can people find you online, Lauren?
That's the main thing. I have an author website, so laurenforryauthor.com, but the links to that are also in my social media. So Instagram, the Twitter that I refuse to call X. I'm still on
It's
there.
hard calling it X,
I
isn't
don't
it?
call it X. I'm still on there, and Blue Sky. So I'm not on there as much, but I'll post what I'm reading on there with the dog.
Yeah, yeah. I'm on Blue Sky too, but I'm still adjusting to Blue Sky. There's
Yeah, it's
just so many
very,
out there and so
I
many to keep up
know.
with. Yeah.
It seemed like the easiest alternative at the time,
Yeah.
but I don't do much on there. So mainly Instagram is probably where I'm on the most, but then also on my find stuff out on my direct website too.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Lauren, I thank you so much for being on the show. I had a blast talking with you about your books and about writing and just so many different things. And
Oh,
meeting your furry friends
yeah,
there.
2 out of the 3. The oldest one, Gizmo, is very camera shy, so he's never in the photos that I post on Instagram because he doesn't like his picture being taken. Turns his head away, he walks away. So
Well, I'm
the
sure Gizmo is wonderful. It has a fantastic name.
yeah, after Gremlins, of course.
Yes, I'm sure.
Don't get him wet. No food after him.
Well, thank you again, Lauren. And to my audience, I thank you very much for being a part of Books. Let me say the name of my show right, Buddies, Book Buddies. And no matter what you're doing today, I hope you have a wonderful time. Take care, folks. Bye. Thanks again, Lauren.
Thanks.